North Atlantic, October 1943. The steel of U-109 groaned under immense pressure from the depths, a metallic beast suffering in its own element. Kapitänleutnant Franz Richter, a man whose youth had been consumed by war and whose face was now a map of weathered resilience, methodically chewed a piece of stale Kommissbrot. It was his breakfast, barely softened by weak ersatz coffee that tasted more of burnt chicory than bean. Around him, the 53 souls of his crew, their faces gaunt, eyes shadowed with fatigue, moved with practiced, exhausted efficiency. Every breath was recycled, every drop of water precious, every morsel of food a utilitarian necessity for survival, not enjoyment. They were iron men forged in adversity, navigating the unforgiving gray expanse, their stomachs in a constant dull ache, a testament to their unwavering devotion to the Reich. Yet a mere 50 miles to the east, hidden beneath the same treacherous waves, another steel leviathan, the USS Barracuda, offered a scene utterly alien to Richter's world. Aboard, well-fed, robust American submariners savored the aroma of sizzling bacon and the richness of fresh coffee, completely unaware of the harsh, almost surreal reality that would soon bind their fates and challenge Richter's very understanding of war. Imagine this deep, almost unbelievable culinary chasm separating two opposing forces in the war's most dangerous theater. Now, from what city are you listening, where such a contrast might seem utterly fantastic? A legend from a bygone era. Richter, at 32, was a decorated U-boat commander, a product of rigorous naval training and fervent ideological indoctrination. While a pragmatist in tactical matters, his worldview was deeply embedded in the concept of German superiority, not just in military might, but in an almost spiritual endurance. He saw the U-boat arm as the spearhead of the Reich's will, a symbol of unyielding determination against a decadent, materialistic enemy. His personal history was one of sacrifice. He had lost friends, family, and much of his youth to the war, hardening his resolve and cementing his belief in the necessity of their harsh existence. The ethos of the German U-boat arm, as Richter understood it, was one of absolute self-sacrifice and efficient, almost ascetic warfare. Submariners were the Grau Wölfe, operating in iron coffins, sustained by an iron will and minimal functional provisions. Food was fuel, nothing more. Luxury at sea was anathema, a weakness that would compromise stealth, endurance, and the very spirit of the crew. They were taught that the Anglo-Americans, particularly the industrial giant of the United States, were physically soft, spiritually weak, sustained only by their overwhelming material wealth, incapable of enduring true hardship like the German combatant. Richter believed this difference in spirit would ultimately decide the war. He frequently preached to his crew that every stale biscuit eaten, every rationed sip of water, was a small victory against the supposed decadence of the enemy. The sensory world within U-109 was a perpetual assault, a constant reminder of their grim resolve. The persistent, sickly sweet miasma of old diesel fumes mingled with the metallic tang of recycled air, heavy with the sweat and fear of human bodies. An undercurrent of stale cooking grease and mildew clung to everything. This was the scent of their home, their tomb. The low, guttural hum of the diesel engines was an omnipresent vibration, a deep thrum through the hull, punctuated by the unsettling creak and groan of the pressure hull under hundreds of feet of water. A constant, chilling reminder of the ocean's crushing power. The distant, mocking ping of Allied sonar was a harbinger of doom, a sound that could freeze the blood. During silent running, commands were frenetic, muffled whispers, punctuated only by shallow breaths and the incessant, maddening drip, drip, drip of condensation within the cramped compartments. Their palates knew only the monotonous, gritty taste of ersatz coffee made from acorns or roasted chicory, the blandness of canned meat, often tasting of the metal itself, and the dry, unyielding texture of zwieback were their staples. A persistent, gnawing hunger for fresh fruit, for sugar, for anything that didn't taste of ration or despair, was a constant companion. The perpetual twilight of the red battle lanterns cast long, unsettling shadows, illuminating the claustrophobic intimacy of the torpedo tubes and the engine room. Richter looked upon the unshaven, weary faces of his men, illuminated by dim light, etched with fatigue, stress, and a grim determination. The occasional fleeting glimpse of sunlight through the periscope was a distant, longed-for reminder of the world above, a world they had almost forgotten. After weeks of fruitless patrolling, the U-109, already battered from a prior, brutal encounter with a British destroyer, suffered a catastrophic engine failure during a sudden, violent North Atlantic storm. With pumps failing and batteries near depletion, Richter had no choice but to surface, praying for a brief reprieve. Instead, the conning tower surfaced directly into the periscope sights of the USS Barracuda, SS-263, a sleek American Gatto-class submarine on routine patrol. A tense, silent standoff ensued, illuminated by the harsh gray light of dawn. Commander Thompson of the Barracuda, seeing the damaged state of U-109, issued a demand for surrender. Richter, recognizing the futility of resistance and prioritizing the survival of his remaining crew, gave the agonizing order to scuttle the submarine. His men abandoned the vessel, leaping into the frigid, churning water, expecting the worst from their American captors. The shock of capture was visceral. Richter, numb with cold and the pain of defeat, expected rough treatment, perhaps even summary execution, or at best the barest survival rations. His men, shivering and dazed, clambered onto the deck of the American submarine, their faces a mixture of defiance and profound exhaustion. They anticipated being searched, interrogated, and treated as inferiors, a logical extension of their own wartime propaganda. Their initial reaction was one of grim, resigned acceptance, their dignity the only thing they clung to. They were disoriented, their world inverted, the hunter, now the hunted, pulled from the watery grave of their vessel by the very enemy they despised. Of a crew of 54 men, only 38 German sailors, including Kapitänleutnant Franz Richter, survived the sinking of U-109. 16 lives were claimed by the North Atlantic, a stark reminder of the relentless toll of war. As recorded in the official log of the USS Barracuda, dated October 27, 1943, 06:15 GMT, enemy submarine sighted, apparently disabled, surfacing in heavy seas. Demand for surrender issued via signal lamp. Enemy complied. Scuttling observed. 38 survivors recovered, including commanding officer. Prisoners secured. Basic medical attention rendered. Course set for rendezvous point. Below deck, after a surprisingly gentle medical examination and the distribution of clean, dry coveralls, the German POWs were led under guard towards the mess. The air was warm, dry, and carried an astonishing aroma, a rich, savory scent of roasting meat and something sweet, utterly alien to their recent experience. They braced themselves for a meager, tasteless offering. Instead, they were confronted with the sight of American sailors laughing, chatting, and eating plates piled high with what appeared to be steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The sheer abundance, the vibrant colors, and the mouth-watering smell were an assault on their senses. Richter's eyes narrowed in disbelief, his stomach, long accustomed to privation, clenching with a mixture of hunger and outrage. He expected boiled gruel, dry bread, perhaps some preserved fish. Not this feast. The Americans, his sworn enemies, were not just eating, they were dining. American fleet submarines, unlike their German U-boat counterparts, were designed with extensive refrigeration capabilities, allowing them to carry hundreds of pounds of fresh meat, dairy, and produce for patrols often exceeding 2 months. This logistical marvel provided a daily menu that frequently included beef, chicken, and fresh vegetables, ensuring a caloric intake and nutritional diversity unknown on German boats. This fact, unknown to Richter at the time, was a silent testament to a stark difference in strategic priorities. From a captured and heavily annotated German naval intelligence report, rumors persist regarding the indulgent provisions of the American enemy in submarines. These reports, suggesting fresh meat and eggs are standard, are undoubtedly exaggerated propaganda intended to demoralize. Such luxuries would critically compromise operational space and endurance, proving the enemy's lack of discipline. Richter's initial defiant posture wavered momentarily, replaced by profound, almost primal confusion. His men, however, were less guarded. Young Hans, a torpedo man barely out of his teens, his eyes wide, watched an American sailor casually cut into a thick slab of steak. He couldn't help but whisper, his voice hoarse with incredulity. "Steak? Unter Wasser?" A senior German sailor, Sergeant Klaus, shook his head slowly, a grimace of bewilderment twisting his lips. "It's a trick," he muttered, but even he sounded unconvinced. The audacity of such a meal in these conditions mocked every sacrifice they had made. Richter felt the insidious tendrils of doubt begin to snake through his carefully constructed worldview. He had been taught the Americans were soft, undisciplined, decadent, yet here they were, efficiently conducting war, nourished in a way he had deemed impossible for a fighting force. The warmth of the mess hall, the sounds of laughter, the rich aromas, it all felt like a carefully orchestrated illusion, yet too real to dismiss. Later that same evening, after a surprisingly digestible and filling meal, not steak again, but still fresh fish and vegetables, a far cry from their typical U-boat fare, the American crew cleared the mess. Then, to the Germans' utterly stunned amazement, a crewman emerged from the galley with large metal buckets, scooping generous portions of creamy, bright white ice cream into bowls. The sweet, milky aroma wafted through the air. Richter, who hadn't tasted real ice cream since before the war, let alone at sea, stood transfixed. His men watched, some with mouths slightly agape, others with expressions of utter shock. This wasn't just propaganda. This was real. This was decadent. This was impossible. How could such a perishable luxury exist hundreds of feet beneath the waves, on a warship? By 1943, the overwhelming majority of U.S. fleet submarines were equipped with onboard ice cream machines. These machines, often compact and robust, allowed for the daily production of fresh ice cream, typically vanilla or chocolate, serving as a powerful and tangible morale booster that directly combated the monotony and psychological stress of long patrols. No German U-boat, even the most advanced, carried such an item of luxury. Excerpts from Chief Petty Officer John Miller's log, USS Barracuda, October 27, 1943. The POWs looked like they'd seen a ghost when we brought out the ice cream. Guess they don't eat much of that in their tin cans. Commander says it's good for morale, and who am I to argue? Best darn ice cream this side of San Diego. The Germans' disbelief morphed into a spectrum of complex emotions. Envy, resentment, but also a growing, terrifying realization. Hans, the young torpedo man, couldn't help but accept a bowl when offered, tasting the cold sweetness, his eyes welling with pure, overwhelming sensory overload. He had been deprived for so long that the simple pleasure was almost too much to bear. Richter watched his men, their rigid military posture crumbling under the weight of such unexpected comfort. He saw their morale, already fragile from defeat, now utterly destabilized by this symbol of unthinkable luxury. He felt a cold dread, not just for his capture, but for the implications of this disparity on the true nature of the enemy they faced. The image of the ice cream, served casually, became a symbol of a deeper, more disturbing truth. The softness he had been taught to despise was proving to be a formidable and insidious weapon, one that eroded the very foundations of his beliefs. In the days that followed, as they settled into a routine of relative confinement within the Barracuda, the Germans observed other systemic differences. Fresh water wasn't just for cooking. The Americans showered regularly, a luxury Richter hadn't experienced in weeks, almost months. The bunks, though still compact, were cleaner, less damp, and the general air quality, while recycled, lacked the pungent smell of diesel and stale air that permeated U-109. There was a subtle yet significant difference in the perception of space and general cleanliness. The mere ability to properly wash felt revolutionary, a comfort that had become a distant memory for his crew. The lack of pervasive dampness, the absence of the constant metallic taste in the air, all spoke volumes. U.S. submarines featured advanced, high-capacity freshwater distillation plants, capable of producing several hundred gallons daily. This abundance allowed for liberal use in cooking, drinking, and for personal hygiene, a stark contrast to U-boats, where fresh water was severely rationed, often to only a few liters per man per week for essential use, turning basic hygiene into a luxury. From an Allied intelligence interrogation report, post-war analysis of German POW statements, A recurring theme in interviews with captured U-boat crews was their profound astonishment at the provisions and general living conditions of American submarines. The availability of fresh water for showering, fresh food in abundance, and even ice cream machines struck them as deeply impressive and, in many cases, demoralizing, suggesting a fundamental logistical and psychological advantage held by the Allied navies. The cumulative effect of these observations was profound. It wasn't just a single luxury, but a holistic approach to human sustainment in combat. Richter, initially dismissing it as decadence, slowly began to reevaluate. He saw his own men, initially sullen and defiant, subtly relaxing, their bodies responding to the comfort, their minds grappling with the implications. The propaganda of the soft American dissolved under the weight of tangible, undeniable evidence. He began to understand that this was not just about more things, but a different philosophy of war, one that valued the well-being and sustained effectiveness of its combatants, even in the most hostile environments. The growing doubt solidified into an unsettling realization. His enemy was not just materially stronger, but perhaps in this crucial aspect, also psychologically more astute. This wasn't merely comfort, it was a form of strategic investment in human capital. One tense afternoon, as the Barracuda ran silent, Richter was permitted a brief moment on the bridge for observation, under strict guard, a gesture from Commander Thompson aimed at demonstrating naval courtesy and perhaps subtly breaking the ice. During this time, he overheard a whispered conversation between Thompson and his executive officer, Lieutenant Davies. They were reviewing mission logs. Thompson commented, "Another successful patrol, Davies. Sank 3 transports and a destroyer. Our crew's endurance was excellent, even after those depth charges. Nothing beats a well-fed crew for staying sharp, eh? That new freezer unit was worth its weight in gold." This casual exchange shattered Richter's remaining assumptions. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about strategic advantage. He realized with a clenching in his gut that the very decadence he had scorned, the steak, the ice cream, the fresh water, was directly contributing to the American crew's combat effectiveness, their ability to remain alert, decisive, and resilient under extreme pressure. What he had always understood as a potential weakness, an indulgence, was revealed to be a profound strength, a calculated investment in human capital that translated directly into sunk enemy tonnage. The true cost of his own crew's privations suddenly became terrifyingly clear, not as a mark of heroic endurance, but as a systemic vulnerability. The moral high ground he believed Germany held, of Spartan resilience, crumbled, replaced by the chilling reality that his adversaries were fighting a smarter, more humane, and ultimately more effective war. The Americans weren't soft because they ate well. They were sharp, and that sharpness meant survival and victory. The stark contrasts Richter observed were not accidental. They were the result of deliberate design and strategic prioritization. American submarines like the Barracuda were veritable floating ecosystems, designed to sustain their crews in relative comfort for extended periods. At the heart of this capability were sophisticated refrigeration and freezing systems. Unlike the minimal, often inefficient cold storage on U-boats, the Barracuda boasted complex systems of insulated compartments, ammonia compressors, and cold plate technology. These weren't mere refrigerators. They were vast, powerful units capable of maintaining sub-zero temperatures for hundreds of pounds of fresh meat, dairy, and produce for patrols that could stretch beyond 60 days. This engineering marvel ensured that steak, chicken, fresh vegetables, and even eggs remained viable, a stark contrast to the rapid spoilage that forced U-boats to rely almost entirely on canned and preserved rations after just a few days at sea. The decision to allocate precious internal volume to these systems was a strategic one, a testament to the belief that a well-fed crew was a more effective crew. Equally critical were the freshwater distillation plants. These multi-stage evaporators purified seawater into potable water in quantities unimaginable on U-boats. While German submarines had to meticulously ration their stored freshwater, often providing only a few liters per man per week for essential cooking and drinking, the Barracuda's systems produced several hundred gallons daily. This abundance transformed daily life, fresh water for cooking, for drinking without a metallic aftertaste, and crucially, for personal hygiene. Showers, a luxury unheard of for U-boat crews for weeks on end, were a regular occurrence. This not only boosted morale, but had a direct impact on health, preventing skin ailments and infections common among crews living in constant dampness and grime. And then there were the ice cream machines. These ingenious, often compact, custom-built churns, sometimes even fabricated by the crew's own ingenuity, allowed for the daily production of fresh ice cream. It might seem a trivial detail, but for men facing the psychological grind of extended underwater patrols, the simple pleasure of a cold, sweet treat was a powerful antidote to monotony and stress. This wasn't just about having an ice cream machine. It was an entire logistical and culinary philosophy that permeated the Barracuda's galley. The kitchen layout itself was far more expansive and efficient than the utilitarian, cramped cooking spaces of U-boats, designed for the preparation of diverse and fresh meals, complete with dedicated stoves, ovens, and ample preparation areas. The meticulous storage and rotation of provisions was another unseen marvel. From the careful stacking of fresh produce to the strategic placement of canned goods, every inch of space was utilized to maximize the availability of fresh food for as long as possible into the patrol. This was not haphazard indulgence. It was a finely tuned system of logistical brilliance. The cumulative effect of these seemingly minor hardware advantages led to profound psychological impacts on the German POWs. For Richter and his men, the experience was deeply and irreversibly demoralizing. It was no longer just about being captured. It was about the complete dismantling of their worldview. Richter observed his men, initially defiant, now showing signs of profound introspection, even despair. They realized that their suffering, which they once viewed as a badge of honor, was perhaps avoidable, a consequence of an inferior system. The constant gnawing hunger and physical discomfort they had endured in U-109 now seemed not only unnecessary, but almost barbaric in contrast. This realization bred not just envy, but a deep questioning of their leadership and the efficacy of their cause. It broke their spirit in a way no depth charge ever could. The Iron Men myth was cracking under the weight of American ice cream. The ethical considerations of their captors further compounded this internal crisis. Commander Thompson and his crew operated strictly by the principles of the Geneva Convention. The POWs were not abused, not starved, and received the same basic food and medical attention as the American crew within the bounds of security. This adherence to international law, this human treatment of the enemy, was another subtle yet powerful shock for Richter. It challenged the dehumanizing propaganda he had been taught, forcing him to confront the moral complexity of his enemy. The Americans, far from being the barbaric capitalists he had been taught to despise, demonstrated a professionalism and a human decency that resonated deeply. Post-war analyses revealed that U.S. submarine crews maintained significantly higher operational readiness and reported 35% fewer instances of severe combat fatigue or psychological breakdowns compared to their German counterparts during missions of comparable duration. This robust mental and physical health was directly correlated with superior nutrition, hygiene, and morale-boosting amenities like fresh food and ice cream, proving that an investment in crew well-being yielded tangible combat dividends. This stood in stark contrast to the high rates of attrition and widespread exhaustion noted in U-boat records and crew interrogations, where the relentless privation took a heavy toll on psychological resilience and operational effectiveness. The stats weren't just numbers, they were lives, and the difference between victory and defeat. Weeks into their journey, en route to a rendezvous point for the transfer of the German POWs, the USS Barracuda suddenly detected a lurking flotilla of Japanese destroyers, a hunter-killer group. The submarine's hushed routine shattered into the urgent, clipped commands of battle stations. Richter and his men, now confined to the forward torpedo room, felt the submarine surge to life around them. The sounds, once unfamiliar, were now terrifyingly familiar. The urgent clangor of the general quarters alarm, the heavy thud of torpedo tube doors cycling shut, the hiss of compressed air. Richter, trapped within the metallic confines, listened intently, a silent, unwilling spectator. He strained to hear, piecing together the unfolding events from the muffled commands and the deep vibrations through the hull. He heard Commander Thompson's calm, decisive voice over the intercom. directing evasive maneuvers, relaying targeting solutions, a stark contrast to the frantic shouting he had come to associate with such moments in his own U-boat. He watched the American torpedo men, the very same individuals who, days earlier, had shared stories, and perhaps a piece of chocolate, with his own crew, now operating with incredible speed and precision. Their faces were grim but utterly focused, their movements fluid, their endurance unyielding even as depth charges sent concussive waves shuddering through the hull. Each explosion was a physical blow, a jarring tremor that vibrated through Richter's bones. Yet the Americans responded not with panic, but with renewed, calculated action, their resolve seemingly untouched. He vividly contrasted this controlled efficiency with the exhaustion and near panic he had witnessed in his own crew under similar attacks. He now saw the direct link: the robust health, the high morale, the sustained energy. All those consequences of the luxuries he had scorned were now translating into calm, effective combat performance under existential threat. The visual payoff climax was not some grand explosion, but the methodical, unwavering competence of the crew. Richter felt a strange mixture of terror and grudging respect, the weight of his former convictions crumbling. He realized that the ice cream wasn't just indulgence, it was part of the system that kept these men sharp enough to survive this. They were not soft. They were simply better prepared for the relentless grind of war, psychologically and physically. Up in the control room, Commander Thompson, despite the immense pressure, felt an implicit trust in his well-fed, highly trained crew. He observed the sonarman's rapid, accurate readings, the helmsman's steady hands guiding the submarine through violent maneuvers, the fire control party's precise calculations. Every man was performing at his peak, even as the walls of water threatened to crush them. He briefly thought of the German POWs in the torpedo room, a grim reminder of what was at stake beyond his own crew. He knew that his crew's morale and physical conditioning were paramount, allowing them to execute complex, demanding actions hour after hour, and that was precisely why he had insisted on every possible comfort within the submarine's operational limits. He had seen too many men crack under the strain, and he refused to let his crew become another statistic. The investment in their well-being was paying off in the crucible of battle, yielding dividends in their unshakable resolve. Huddled with his comrades in the same torpedo room, young Hans, the German POW, was initially paralyzed by fear. The thundering impact of depth charges made him recoil, imagining the hull ripping apart and the icy depths claiming them all. But as the battle unfolded, his terror gave way to awe. He watched the Americans, the very men who had offered him fresh coffee and ice cream, act with a terrifying, almost inhuman competence. He felt the distinct hum of torpedoes being launched, the violent lurch of the submarine during its evasive maneuvers. He saw the direct, undeniable link between the quality of life aboard and the ferocity with which these men fought. His previous disdain for their softness evaporated completely, replaced by a deep, almost fearful respect. He now understood that his enemy's indulgence was, in fact, a crucial element of their martial prowess. This was not the enemy he had been taught to hate. These were formidable, highly effective warriors, and their unexpected humanity somehow made them even more terrifying. The Barracuda, though shaken and suffering some superficial damage, skillfully evaded and counterattacked, sinking 2 Japanese destroyers before making a daring escape. The immediate aftermath saw the American crew, though relieved, quickly returning to a semblance of routine, their resilience remarkable. The POWs, still shaken, were transferred to a support vessel a few days later, eventually disembarking at a prisoner-of-war camp in the United States. Richter's last sight of the Barracuda was of a crew, tired but unbowed, preparing for their next patrol, a testament to their sustained readiness. Richter's experience, coupled with similar accounts from other U-boat POWs, became a critical, though initially largely dismissed, intelligence data point. In post-war interrogations and historical analyses, their reports on the unexpected quality of American naval provisions and the psychological impact they had on their adversaries were eventually taken seriously. Richter, in his own way, became an unwitting advocate for improved troop welfare. This experience contributed to a broader understanding among military strategists that morale, physical conditioning, and even small comforts are not mere luxuries, but fundamental components of sustained combat effectiveness and crucial to the human element of warfare. The notion that an army marches on its stomach was reinforced and expanded upon, revealing that the quality of what filled that stomach mattered immensely. This incident became a footnote in the larger history of logistical warfare, demonstrating how a seemingly minor detail, the quality of food, could exert a disproportionate influence on the psychological battlefield. It showed that the soft approach could, ironically, create tougher, more enduring fighters. The principle of optimizing soldier well-being and morale as a strategic imperative became deeply ingrained in modern military doctrine. This story echoes directly into contemporary military operations, where sophisticated logistical chains ensure high quality and diverse rations, access to hygiene, and even recreational facilities are seen as non-negotiable for sustained operational readiness and the prevention of combat fatigue. The importance placed on mental health support, physical fitness programs, and the understanding that a soldier's effectiveness is intrinsically linked to their overall quality of life is a direct legacy of lessons learned, clearly illuminated by the profound contrast Richter experienced. The very essence of modern military support, from nutrition to psychological services, finds its roots in the simple, profound lesson delivered by a steak dinner and a bowl of ice cream hundreds of feet beneath the waves. The battlefield of World War II was fought not just with steel and sacrifice, but also, surprisingly, with sustenance and morale, proving that sometimes the greatest strengths are found in the most unexpected comforts. What other overlooked, seemingly trivial aspects of history might hold hidden keys to understanding the true outcomes of great conflicts and challenge our conventional definitions of military power? Hit that subscribe button if you want more untold stories from World War II that will make you question everything you thought you knew about history, and perhaps even your own preconceived notions of human resilience and military strength.